Hey guys, tonight we're pulling up a chair for the most awkward, anxiety-inducing meal in history. The Victorian dinner party. Forget Bridgerton, forget Downton Abbey. This is less romantic soiree and more extremely polite panic attack in a corset. So before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment and let me know what you're snacking on, unless it's aspic. Please, not aspic. Now, dim those lights, turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and get as comfortable as you can, because tonight you're about to attend a dinner party where one misplaced fork can ruin your entire social standing. Literally. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what would happen if you used the wrong spoon and accidentally triggered a minor social apocalypse? Why did Victorians put so much effort into napkin folding, but almost none into inventing palatable food? Did anyone actually want more jelly made of calves' feet? How did anyone survive a meal with 9 courses and 17 different glasses? And did anyone ever just eat a burger in private? What do you do if you drop your monocle into the soup, or you sneeze on a duchess, or your moustache wax melts into your consommé? And was it really possible to be exiled for buttering your bread the continental way? Well, congratulations. You've just woken up in 1874. You're wearing a suit with more buttons than sense, or a dress so tight you can't actually sit down. You're surrounded by strangers, all judging your bread plate decisions, and dinner hasn't even started. Good luck. The first test wasn't even the food, it was getting invited. A Victorian dinner invitation was a coded message hidden in scented cardstock. Accept too quickly, and you're desperate. Decline, and you're a social outcast. Accept with pleasure, but show up 2 minutes late, and you might as well change your name and move to Scotland. You're standing in your hallway when it arrives, an envelope with edges so sharp they could cut glass, and a smell that says I own more lavender than you ever will. The handwriting alone is enough to make you question every penmanship decision you've ever made. No ballpoint here, just ink quills, calligraphy, and a subtle suggestion that your social future now rests in the hands of someone who's very good at swirling their R's. You break the seal with trembling fingers, half expecting it to explode in a cloud of rose petals and silent judgment. Inside, the invitation. Heavy paper, gold embossing, and enough flourishes to make your eyes water. There's a crest at the top, you're not entirely sure whose, and a request for the pleasure of your company, as if anyone in this century has ever felt truly at ease at these things. Now the clock starts ticking. Starts. You must respond, but not too soon. Reply immediately and you look over eager, like a golden retriever who just heard the word walk. Wait too long, and you're obviously weighing better options. Or worse, you don't understand the complex ballet of social timing. You stand at your writing desk, sweating, as you draft your RSVP. The paper must be pristine, your script flawless, your ink not too blue, not too black. You find yourself testing pen after pen, convinced they can smell panic through the envelope. Even the language is a trap. You can't just write, "See you there." That's the social equivalent of showing up in cargo shorts. You must use the correct phrases, "I accept with the greatest pleasure," or if you're declining, something so laden with regret and flattery that it could be bottled and sold as perfume. Alas, I am devastated to miss such a grand occasion, my heart heavy as lead, my spirit broken, all to avoid the host thinking you're just staying home to pluck your eyebrows, or read penny dreadfuls by candlelight. Of course, you're not the only one playing this game. Every guest is locked in their own invitation agony. You hear whispers at the grocer's, at church, in the terrifyingly well-lit corners of the haberdashery. Did you get one? When did you reply? Did you see the wax seal? Oh, not the red one, that's for Thursdays. I got green, so I suppose I'm in for soup with the Archdeacon. Social currency is measured in invitations, and missing one is worse than losing your bank account. At least with bankruptcy you can still go to lunch. And once you've replied, the real waiting begins. Will your acceptance be acknowledged? Will you be listed in the society pages? Did you remember to address Lady Havisham as the most honourable, or just Mrs. Havisham, which is what her dog calls her, apparently? It's like the world's most stressful job application, except the only job you're applying for is person who is allowed to eat cold lamb in mixed company. You try to distract yourself with mundane tasks, but the anxiety lingers. What if they've accidentally invited 2 people with the same name? What if you show up and there's no place card for you? What if you're not actually invited and the whole thing was meant for your neighbour? And now you're halfway through the soup when someone asks, "And who exactly are you?" Modern comparison. Imagine the tension of waiting for a text back, but multiply it by the threat of actual exile, and add a faint but constant smell of mothballs and gardenias. It's networking, but with more lace and the real possibility of being discussed in detail by someone named Hortense. Finally, the day arrives. You've made it through the invitation gauntlet, your RSVP was timed just right, your response composed with all the desperate poetry of a Victorian novelist, and your hands only mildly stained with ink. You're in. One hurdle cleared, only 17 more social catastrophes to go before dessert. Punchline. And all of this just to spend the evening trying not to choke on a jellied tongue while making polite conversation with someone who breeds hedgehogs for fun. You can't make this up. RSVP didn't mean maybe, I'll see how I feel. It meant you had to reply by hand with exactly the right wording, ink colour and level of obsequiousness. Send your response too soon? Try hard. Too late. Barbarian. Use the wrong pen. They'll gossip about you for a generation. Welcome to the Olympic sport of Victorian correspondence, where every stroke of your quill is a potential act of social sabotage. This isn't a matter of just texting back K, this is a battlefield of parchment and pride, where one misstep can have you banished from the table to the outer darkness, otherwise known as Aunt Euphemia's Wednesday luncheons. First, you must assemble your RSVP toolkit. Notepaper so smooth it could double as a silk cravat, a pen with a nib fine enough to carve your regrets onto a grain of rice, an ink that is neither so bold as to seem impertinent, nor so faded as to suggest you can't afford a fresh bottle. Heaven forbid your ink is blotchy. A single drop and you'll be remembered as the one with the tragic blot, a reputation that will outlive most small countries. Now, breathe deeply. You can do this. The host's invitation is already sitting on your desk, radiating judgment from beneath its wax seal. You select your stationery, trying to remember whether cream is more appropriate than ecru, and whether you're permitted a monogram or if that's a privilege reserved for dukes and the occasional ambitious terrier. No pressure. You begin to compose your reply. It cannot be too short lest you seem dismissive, but too long, and you risk being mistaken for someone who writes letters to the newspaper about the scandalous price of turnips. You practice your flourishes. You edit out any dangerous signs of personality. You address the host by their full title, including the bits they probably only use when ordering cheese by mail. Every phrase is a minefield. It would be my pleasure to attend is safe, but is it passionate enough? I eagerly await the evening as enthusiastic, but are you now suspected of ulterior motives involving the host's collection of porcelain spaniels? Even your closing signature must be crafted with the delicacy of a glassblower at a toddler's birthday party. Yours most sincerely, a bit stiff, with grateful anticipation, possibly desperate. Most respectfully yours, safe, but now you sound like you're proposing marriage. And then, of course, the delivery. You can't just toss it in the post and hope for the best. No, your letter must be hand-delivered, ideally by a footman whose calves are admired by all, at the precise hour when the butler is taking the daily airing of grievances in the front hall. If you're forced to send it by ordinary mail, you might as well write your apology in chalk on the garden wall. Let's not even mention your penmanship. The Victorians believed a person's soul could be judged by their ability to maintain a consistent slant. Your reply must be legible, elegant, and absolutely devoid of anything resembling a doodle, smiley face, or, God help you, a stray ink smudge. If your Y loops the wrong way, expect an entire side table at dinner devoted to whispering about the lower loop incident. All of this, the stationery, the ink, the ritualized hand delivery, the desperate avoidance of both lateness and keenness, serves one purpose: to convince your host you are both honoured and exactly the right amount of busy. You are delighted, but not desperate. Free, but not too free. Eager, but not famished. Modern comparison: imagine trying to RSVP to a birthday party by carefully handwriting your response with a fountain pen, then having it couriered by someone on a Segway, all while worrying your choice of envelope colour will be screenshotted and group chatted for eternity. Now add lace cuffs and the omnipresent threat of being shunned by people named Percival. Finally, the reply is away. You exhale, hands cramped, ink stained, and spirit battered. Will your RSVP be received in the correct spirit? Will the hostess read too much into your choice of paperweight? Did you remember the right number of exclamation points? Hint, 0. You try not to imagine Lady Cressida's face as she opens your envelope, scanning your letter for signs of madness, poverty, or, worst of all, originality. All of this for the privilege of sitting silently while a string quartet plays waltzes and someone offers you a gelatinous mystery food. Welcome to the RSVP. In the Victorian era, the real meal was always anxiety. Choosing an outfit was like preparing for battle, only the weapons were lace and starch. Men had to wrestle with starched collars sharp enough to maim. Women contorted themselves into dresses engineered by sadists with an interest in light asphyxiation. Forget comfort tonight, you dress for survival. You begin hours in advance, hovering near your wardrobe, already sweating. For men, the challenge is not simply which suit, but which combination of tailcoat, waistcoat, cravat, cuffs and boot polish is least likely to spark a family scandal. A single mismatched button could haunt your family for generations. Ah yes, the trotter boy. Wore brass with black. Poor breeding. Your collar is starched to the rigidity of a medieval torture device. You practice sitting, but quickly learn that any attempt to look comfortable will sever your carotid artery. Meanwhile, if you're a woman, the stakes are even higher. You stand surrounded by a battalion of undergarments, chemises, corsets, petticoats, hoops, bustles, each more complicated than the last. The corset alone requires the strength of 3 farmhands and a mutual trust exercise with your lady's maid. Tighter, someone hisses. No, not that tight. I'd like to breathe through most of dinner, thank you. Breathing, it turns out, is optional. Having a waist the circumference of a breadstick, mandatory. You peer into the mirror, and for a moment, you see your own wild eyes peering back, silently pleading for mercy. Your hair is next, a feat of engineering involving hot tongs, hair rats, and a small fortune in hairpins. At least half the dinner conversation later tonight will involve reassuring someone their top knot hasn't collapsed into the consommé. Accessories are their own category of peril. Men must choose a pocket square that is both effortlessly elegant and somehow conveys political neutrality, while ensuring their shoes are polished to a shine so blinding it can be seen from space. Women, on the other hand, select jewellery that says I am fashionable and solvent, but not vulgar or French. The right brooch could mean an advantageous marriage proposal, the wrong necklace, a decade of polite exile. The house itself smells faintly of starch, hair pomade, mothballs, and the unmistakable tang of preemptive panic. Servants dart back and forth with mysterious sprays and brushes, muttering about lint and dandruff as if a single stray thread could spark a civil war. The weather is rarely your friend. If it's cold, you'll freeze in the name of fashion. If it's hot, you'll sweat through enough linen to qualify as a minor tributary of the Thames. Forget climate control, the only thing under your control is how gracefully you faint. You consider skipping dinner and inventing a fever, but rumours swirl about people who refused invitations and ended up teaching elocution to poultry in Wales. Modern comparison. Imagine the worst day of back-to-school shopping, multiplied by prom, a job interview with the Queen, and a high-stakes hostage negotiation, except the hostage is your internal organs, and the negotiator is your corset. You finally emerge, blinking, into the candlelit hallway. You've forgotten what oxygen tastes like, but your posture could cut glass. Your shoes are so tight your toes are learning Morse code. As you await your carriage, you try not to think about the many ways your outfit could fail you. A button popping at the soup course, a hem tearing during the quadrille, or worst of all, a faint mustiness that suggests you haven't replaced your petticoat since the last Jubilee. It's all worth it, of course, for the chance to impress your hosts, outshine your rivals, and, just maybe, make it through the evening without anyone noticing that you're actually held together by 6 pins, 2 prayers, and a thin sheen of desperation. Punchline. And as you glide or hobble into the drawing room, remember, no one feels comfortable. The difference is just how well they pretend. In the Victorian sartorial Olympics, survival is the only true victory. Arriving was a performance. Too early, you'll help set the table. Too late, scandal. You were expected to glide into the entry hall, hand off your hat, and act as if you definitely knew which fork to use, even as your knees locked from terror and restricted circulation. The carriage ride over is a masterclass in anticipation and anxiety. Your internal clock ticks down to the second as you bounce along cobblestone streets, clutching your gloves in a death grip. You rehearse your entrance in your mind, right foot first, posture upright, chin at a dignified but not arrogant angle. The stakes? Only your entire reputation. No pressure. As your carriage pulls up, you spot the other arrivals loitering at the edge of the driveway. Some are lingering nervously, pretending to admire the shrubbery as they count the minutes, hoping not to breach that most sacred Victorian rule. Never arrive before the hostess is ready to look pleased to see you. Arrive at the exact right moment, and you're punctual and well-bred. Too soon, and you might as well don an apron and ask where the potatoes go. The entry hall is a battlefield disguised as a hallway. You're swept into a flurry of action, servants darting, over-perfumed air swirling, the silent expectation that you should both hand over your hat and never let anyone see you struggle with the laces. The butler greets you with the impassive face of a man who's seen 1,000 hat mishaps and still isn't impressed. You nod in return, hand over your coat, and try not to look as if you've just run a marathon in formal wear. Next comes the calling card ritual. You've practiced this. You produce your card with a practiced flick of the wrist, silently praying it isn't smudged or, heaven forbid, bent at the corner. The butler accepts it with the seriousness usually reserved for peace treaties and child custody hearings. Somewhere, behind a door, your arrival is announced, your name echoing down a corridor lined with ancestors, who are all quietly judging you from their portraits. You're ushered into a sea of guests, each standing in carefully measured clumps, balancing glasses and small talk. There's a choreography to this. Don't move too fast, don't look too desperate for conversation, and definitely don't hover near the food. You scan the room for a familiar face, but all you see are people in identical shades of navy, grey, or aggressively cheerful floral print, all of whom seem infinitely more confident than you. If you're lucky, a host or hostess appears, gliding over with a fixed smile and a greeting that feels both warm and a little like an exam. You're expected to offer the right combination of deference and wit. Too formal, and you're a bore. Too relaxed, and you're a scandal. Someone brings up the weather, and you find yourself nodding with profound interest, grateful for the safe ground. Don't mention politics. Don't mention the incident with the vicar's dog. Above all, don't comment on the host's new moustache unless you're certain it's intentional. Your arrival is a blur of tiny perils. Do you shake hands or bow, curtsy or nod? Someone drops a glove, and there's a moment of silent horror as you both reach for it. Will you accidentally brush hands? Will the servant swoop in? The etiquette is so layered and specific that you're constantly terrified you'll step outside its boundaries and land in a pit of social quicksand. Modern comparison. Think of entering a high-stakes networking event, only instead of business cards, you're armed with a sword made of linen and a shield of forced cheerfulness. You're not just making an entrance, you're running a silent obstacle course in front of a crowd of people who've memorized the rulebook and written new rules for fun. And when the bell rings for dinner, you exhale, knowing the hardest part is, allegedly, behind you. Except you now have to find your seat, navigate the cutlery, and pray that your hat will be returned unsinged at the end of the night. Welcome to the party, arrival survived, dignity barely intact, and only 12 more etiquette tests to go. Punchline. Just remember, no one ever talks about the entree you ordered, but everyone will remember if you tripped on the entry rug. Good luck. Before you could even sniff the soup, you endured an hour of light conversation. This involved standing perfectly still, balancing a glass of something lukewarm, and pretending you had opinions about weather, railways, or, God forbid, someone's collection of beetles. The pre-dinner mingling was less of a social warm-up and more of a gladiatorial contest fought in low voices and high collars. You hovered near the fringes of the drawing room, holding a fragile glass of sherry or claret, the temperature always somewhere between tepid and just washed the decanter. The first challenge was mastering the art of holding your glass. Too firm and you risked snapping the stem. Too loose and you risked adding your own personal vintage to the rug. Never sip too fast, it signals desperation. Never sip too slow, it suggests suspicion. The ideal was an air of casual indifference, as if you had so many dinner invitations you barely noticed this one. You glance around. The room is full of people who've mastered the Victorian lean, one arm at the perfect angle, eyes half-lidded with polite boredom. All conversation is governed by strict invisible laws. Speak first only if you outrank everyone in the room, or you're willing to risk exile for social overreach. The safest topics, the recent drizzle, the Earl's new greenhouse, or the scandalous speed of the 7:43 train to Oxford. Step beyond those boundaries, and you risk being known as the one who brought up Irish politics before the oysters. You nod earnestly at Lord Wensleydale's 3-minute weather report. Yes, a most peculiar pattern of drizzle, quite unlike the mist last Thursday. You manage to feign intense interest in Miss Prudence's retelling of her father's railway journey, which, as far as you can tell, involved a minor delay and a deeply upsetting cup of tea. She describes the train whistle in such detail that you begin to question whether you've ever actually heard a train before. And then the true gauntlet, eccentric hobbies. Someone corners you with the immortal phrase, "Do let me tell you about my beetles." You smile gamely as you learn about rare stag beetles, the process of pinning, and the exact number of drawers in the collection, 12 but soon to be 14 if the shipment from Belgium arrives. You offer comments, "How fascinating, how very shiny," while wondering if you might faint from hunger, boredom, or the scent of mothballs. Meanwhile, you must remain vigilant. The worst fate is to be trapped in a conversational cul-de-sac with no polite escape route. At any moment, the hostess may sweep past, introducing you to the Colonel's wife, who immediately launches into a monologue about the virtues of boiled mutton. You nod, hoping someone will spill their drink and trigger a mercy distraction. Your feet ache already. The heels of your shoes are sharp enough to count as concealed weapons, and your corset, or collar, is slowly compressing your ability to breathe, let alone speak. Still, you press on, weaving through clusters of small talk and trying to remember which Lady Whistledown is the one who owns the dog, and which is the one who smells like pickled onions. Modern comparison. It's the office holiday party, but with more lace and fewer safe topics. Imagine trying to network while standing on a wobbling balance board, your phone glued to your hand, except your phone is a fragile glass and the only notifications are eyebrow raises. If you do well, you'll be rewarded with a nod of approval, maybe a whispered invitation to discuss ferns with Lord Bingley next week. If you do poorly, your name will be muttered in parlours for years. Remember the time someone discussed the potato famine before the consommé? As the gong finally signals dinner, you exhale. You have survived the awkwardness, barely. Your glass is empty, your feet are numb, and you've developed strong opinions about beetles. Congratulations, you've passed the first course of the evening's social menu, punchline. And as you shuffle toward the dining room, one thought lingers. There is no hors d'oeuvre quite so filling as pure, undiluted anxiety. The dinner table was a battlefield disguised as a buffet. You didn't sit where you wanted. The host performed a complex algorithm, seating you next to people who would least likely cause a duel. If you swapped seats, social Armageddon. Every Victorian dinner party began with the single most important question: where will you be put? In this world, a place at the table was never just a place. It was a declaration of status, preference, and a little light favouritism, like Survivor, but with more lace and higher stakes. The host and hostess, armed with a terrifying knowledge of everyone's grudges, alliances, dietary quirks, and propensity for starting wars over bread rolls, spent hours plotting a seating chart worthy of the Ministry of Defence. You arrive, heart in your throat, eyes scanning for your fate, a tent card bearing your name, inscribed with the kind of calligraphy usually reserved for royal decrees and ransom notes. You search the table with all the desperation of someone scanning for a lifeboat. Are you in the middle, near the head, within sneezing distance of the soup? Your social standing is on display, revealed in the proximity to the host, and how many people must be traversed to fetch you a bread roll. Take your seat too soon, and you risk stepping on the toes of hierarchy. Sit too late, and you might end up awkwardly trapped between two people locked in a decades-old silent feud about the correct pronunciation of scone. There are rules within rules. Gentlemen escort ladies. Guests of honour face the door, not the window. The host presides, radiating an air of gentle authority, mixed with the panic of someone hoping no one will mention the scandal with the undercooked pheasant from last March. Then there's the sacred art of separating the combustibles. The host's goal? Minimise explosive interactions. Aunt Agatha, notorious for her opinions on the Irish question, is flanked by two deaf vicars. Lord Pumpernickel, who once started a food fight over a misplaced asparagus tongue, is seated at the far end, close enough to taste the soup, far enough to prevent an incident with the trifle. You, meanwhile, are strategically placed between Miss Fairfax, a conversational black hole, and Mr. Biddlecombe, whose only hobby is the telegraph. Good luck. Swapping seats is an unthinkable act, akin to inviting the French Navy into Portsmouth. Once, Lady Cresswell attempted to trade places to escape the company of Major Blenkinsop. For 3 years, she was served last at every luncheon, and was, reportedly, haunted by the ghost of the family butler. You stay put. You nod politely to your companions and brace yourself for a solid 90 minutes of conversations about ferns, colonial tariffs, and the dangers of imported cheese. Even your posture matters. Sitting too close to the table signals desperation. Too far back, and you risk knocking over the epergne, a decorative centerpiece built for beauty and accidental destruction. The menu cards are right there, but do you read them now and look over eager, or wait for the right social cue? The whole arrangement is a dance, choreographed to the silent, relentless beat of Victorian etiquette. Modern comparison. Imagine being assigned seats at a wedding, only instead of just avoiding your ex, you also have to avoid sparking an international incident over soup. It's Google Calendar meets Minesweeper, but every explosion is a family grudge that lasts 3 generations. And so you settle in, rehearsing safe topics. Have you seen the latest postage stamp? Clutching your napkin like a lifeline, and trying not to make eye contact with anyone who looks like they might discuss gout. Your future is set for the evening. There's no escape, just a polite smile, the hope that the bread reaches your end of the table, and a silent prayer that the only thing that blows up tonight is the soufflé. Punchline. In Victorian society, choosing the wrong seat could end your reputation. In the seating game, there are no second chances, only a footnote in tomorrow's gossip, and the memory of that time you accidentally unleashed social Armageddon with a chair. Dinner wasn't just eating, it was utensil triage. 5 forks, 3 spoons, a random mystery implement that looked like a dental device. You started from the outside and worked in, unless you wanted to be banished to the children's table for eternity. You sit down, and the first thing you notice after your name card and the disapproving stare of the family portrait above the mantel is the shimmering battalion of silverware gleaming beside your plate. The sheer volume of cutlery could have supported a small ironworks. Forks line up like soldiers reporting for duty. Fish fork, salad fork, entree fork, dessert fork, and the ever-mysterious oyster fork for those who dare. Each has its own unique curvature, prong count, and social implication. Choose poorly, and you're one step closer to disgrace. Next come the spoons: soup spoon, dessert spoon, the oddly large spoon for mysterious Victorian stews, and the just-for-show spoon, placed there, some believe, to test the weak. Let's not even get started on the knives: butter knife, meat knife, fish knife, and that other one. The one with the serrated edge that looks like it's meant for minor surgery, but is in fact only for the roast. Then there's the wild card, the implement with the pronged end and spoon-like scoop, rumoured to be for asparagus or perhaps for launching peas across the table. No one actually knows. If you so much as glance at it the wrong way, Lady Petunia will arch an eyebrow and make a note in her mental Rolodex of social failings. The rules are simple, so simple they require a decade of practice and a family tree traced back to William the Conqueror. You always start with the utensil furthest from your plate and work inward as the courses proceed. But what if you're left-handed? What if the servants set things in the wrong order? What if, horror of horrors, you drop a fork? In that case, you mustn't retrieve it yourself. The butler will glide in with a replacement, his eyes silently communicating that you will never live this down. Your every move is under surveillance. Take up the wrong fork and you risk starting a wave of social confusion that could ripple down the table, culminating in the vicar trying to eat his pudding with a fish knife. The only thing worse is hesitating, frozen in fear, fingers trembling above a sea of options, while the guest to your left watches with polite amusement and the one to your right quietly shifts her seat away from you. The utensils aren't just for food, they're signals. If you rest your fork and knife parallel on the plate, it means you're finished. Place them in a V and the servants will circle, ready for the next course. Cross them, and you've just declared war on etiquette. The cutlery choreography is relentless and unforgiving, with the clinking of silver providing the tense soundtrack to your anxiety. Modern comparison. Imagine you're at a trendy restaurant, and the menu requires 6 apps to navigate, 3 napkins of varying textures, and 1 optional pair of chopsticks. Now imagine the waiter is also your mother-in-law, the chef is your boss, and the review is going straight to the national press. Some guests cope by watching the host, mimicking every move in a kind of anxious utensil ballet. Others go rogue, pretending not to care, only to find themselves spearing a delicate tartlet with what turns out to be the pickle fork. The bravest simply bluff, wielding whichever instrument seems plausible, and praying the next course isn't soup served in a bread bowl. By dessert, your nerves are shot. You've survived the salad fork, the fish knife, and the strange implement that no one can name. You marvel at the Victorians' commitment to turning dinner into a spectator sport, one where the only real winner is the butler, who's seen it all before. Punchline. If you make it through the parade of forks unscathed, congratulations. You're now qualified to perform minor surgery, or at least carve your initials into the history books, one utensil at a time. Napkin etiquette was practically a martial art. Fold wrong, and you signalled everything from I wish to duel to I'm secretly French. Place it on your lap too soon and you're a savage. Drop it on the floor and you may as well fake your own death. There it sits, your napkin, a perfectly starched rectangle of linen, folded into a shape so elaborate you suspect it was designed by a bored engineer on house arrest. It perches on your plate like a white dove, or perhaps a minor architectural marvel, daring you to touch it. The room is full of them, swans, pyramids, and something that looks suspiciously like a ship at half-mast. Each fold is a message, each crease a potential scandal. You watch the host out of the corner of your eye. In Victorian society, the napkin is not simply a tool for catching soup drips or mopping gravy from your moustache. It's a silent form of communication, a social semaphore. Place your napkin on your lap before the hostess. Barbaric. Wait too long, and you risk appearing absent-minded or worse, indifferent to centuries of civilization. The moment arrives. The hostess delicately plucks her napkin and arranges it in her lap with the poise of a ballet dancer. You follow suit, careful not to unravel your creation into a limp rag. If you manage to keep it folded while transferring it, you earn silent respect from the butler and a faint nod from the lady with the pearls. Should your napkin tumble to the floor, you freeze. Etiquette demands you subtly signal for a servant to rescue it. Any attempt at self-retrieval brands you as a wild animal, the sort who might chew bones at the table or, worse, drink straight from the finger bowl. Napkin use is an art unto itself. Blot, never wipe. Dab at the corners of your mouth with all the delicacy of someone handling a relic from the Holy Land. Never, ever use the napkin to stifle a sneeze. If the urge arises, simply explode with silent dignity and apologize later in writing. And under no circumstances should you tuck your napkin into your collar, unless you wish to be mistaken for an unsupervised toddler, or even worse, a Frenchman. Napkin folding itself is a competitive sport. Some hosts hire professionals to craft elaborate sculptures, each design laden with coded messages about the meal, the weather, or your standing in the local parish. The bishop's mitre signals formality, the fan suggests a more relaxed affair, the rosebud may be a subtle hint to compliment the hostess's gardening efforts. If you unfold the napkin and it cracks like a gunshot, do not flinch. This is a test. The strong survive. Throughout the meal, your napkin is your constant companion. It sits in your lap, a small flag of hope and anxiety. If you must leave the table, fold it loosely and place it to the left of your plate, never on the chair, never in your soup, never sculpted into an origami badger. Returning the napkin to its original shape is a feat only attempted by the bravest or most oblivious. Modern comparison. Imagine you're given a branded tote bag at a networking event, but you're only allowed to use it if you first perform an interpretive dance. Everyone is watching, the rules are secret, and the only thing you know for sure is that you're not supposed to panic. As the meal ends, you breathe a sigh of relief. You've navigated the perils of linen choreography, surviving the silent code of folds and placements. If you make it to dessert without public humiliation or accidental napkin seppuku, you're already ahead of half the guests. Punchline. In the world of Victorian dinner parties, napkin etiquette wasn't just about cleanliness, it was about survival. One wrong fold, and you were history. Or, at the very least, the subject of next week's juiciest gossip. The host always welcomed guests with an unnerving smile and a reminder about simple little rules. This was code for, break them, and you'll be dissected in tomorrow's gossip. You smiled back, hoping you remembered which water glass was yours. It's a masterclass in social theatre. The moment you step into the drawing room, you're greeted by the host, resplendent in waistcoat or gown, radiating both hospitality and the subtle menace of a seasoned schoolmaster. The smile is warm enough to melt butter, but the eyes are scanning, measuring hats, counting buttons, taking stock of who's already on thin ice and who will need to be watched near the silverware. The host's voice is gentle, almost musical. We do so hope you enjoy yourself. Just a few little customs here, nothing too fussy. But behind every word is an unspoken threat. Observe the rituals or suffer the consequences. A small laugh follows, and you echo it, uncertain if this is the point where you're meant to curtsy, bow, or simply hold your breath until the introductions are over. Before you even make it to the table, the host is already at work planting small seeds of etiquette in the air. I always find a napkin folded thus is most practical, they remark, glancing at your trembling hands. And of course, we do try to keep conversation to the light and delightful. Translation: no politics, no religion, and don't bring up the time Lady Everleigh's wig caught fire near the pudding. You glance around, making a mental checklist of rules you hope you remember. Don't sit before you're shown your place. Don't talk too much, but don't be silent. Don't compliment the soup too early, or it might seem sarcastic. There are more codes here than in a bank vault, and you're working without the combination. The host moves from group to group, dispensing little reminders. Do help yourself to the bread, but of course, break it with your hands, never cut it. You nod along as if you've never once thought about buttering a roll with a knife like some culinary anarchist. In Victorian society, even the smallest lapse is ammunition for gossip. Did you see the way she held her fork? Like a dock worker. He buttered his bread in a single motion, as if raised by wolves. And so you police your every move, muscles tense, face locked in an expression of eager, yet not too eager anticipation. You try to relax, but the host's presence is like a gentle storm on the horizon. Even the compliments feel double-edged. What a delightful brooch, Miss Rose. Family piece? Oh, your great aunt. How charming. You wonder if charming means lovely, tragic, or please never wear that again in my home. As dinner is announced and you're shepherded toward the dining room, the host's smile grows brighter. Please, everyone, just enjoy yourselves, oh, and do remember, the fish fork is to your left. Wouldn't want anyone to go hungry. You glance down in mild panic, trying to remember your cutlery orientation, desperately hoping you won't spear a potato with the wrong implement. Modern comparison: imagine being welcomed to a team meeting by your new boss, who says we're very relaxed here, but you know, we do expect everyone to use exactly the right font for their slides. No pressure. And then proceeds to review your resume in front of everyone just to be sure. Throughout the evening, the host is everywhere, refilling glasses, steering conversation, and if needed, delivering a gentle course correction with the precision of a chess master. Perhaps a little more wine, Mrs. Goodwin? No, not that glass, the smaller one. Each reminder is sweet on the surface, but beneath it is a razor. Conform, or be the story people whisper about for the next month. Punchline. By dessert, you realize that the host's simple little rules aren't just guidelines, they're survival tactics. Smile, nod, and try not to breathe too loud. In the end, the best guests are the ones who make it through the meal with their dignity and their water glass still intact. Soup was the opening act and a test. You sipped quietly, never slurped, never blew on it, and above all, never tilted the bowl. If you made a sound, the butler would appear at your elbow, silently judging your lineage. The moment arrives. A servant materializes at your side, holding a tureen like it contains the crown jewels. Ladle after ladle, steaming fragrant liquid is dispensed into your bowl, with such gravitas you'd think it was a rare elixir or possibly nitroglycerin. You are now face to face with your first real challenge of the night, the soup course. It glimmers invitingly, promising warmth and flavour, but lurking beneath the surface is danger. A misstep here, and your reputation won't survive to see dessert. You reach for your spoon, the largest one unless you want to risk using the fruit spoon, and cementing your place in family legend, and the choreography begins. The Victorian way is always to dip the spoon away from you, not toward, one wrong motion, and your neighbours might flinch. Each spoonful is a gentle, practiced arc, out, scoop, in, and if you value your dignity, absolutely no drips. If you must tap your spoon, it should be so subtle that the Queen herself couldn't detect it. You take your first sip. The liquid is always slightly too hot, never hot enough to burn your taste buds, just enough to test your patience. Blowing on the soup is a cardinal sin. Only children and the French apparently would dare such a thing. The correct procedure is to wait, looking pensively into your bowl as if searching for philosophical meaning until the soup cools on its own. Sometimes it never does. Under no circumstances do you slurp. The room is so silent that the sound of a spoon against porcelain could be mistaken for cannon fire. If, by some cruel trick of fate, a noodle escapes and flicks a single drop onto your lap, you must ignore it with the stoicism of a Roman general. Dabbing at the spot with your napkin is allowed, but only in the most dignified, disinterested fashion. Every move is watched. The butler's eyes hover like storm clouds over the table, alert for the first sign of unruliness. Guests hold their breath as you navigate the minefield. One accidental cough, or, heaven forbid, a sneeze, and you'll feel every eyebrow in the room arch in unison. There are stories, legends even, of guests who once tilted their soup bowl to reach the last drop, only to be struck from the guest list for eternity and forced to dine in obscurity with their own families. You practice perfect posture, back straight, elbows tucked, spoon never left standing in the bowl, a signal in some cultures that you wish to duel. Should conversation occur, you must pause, never speak with a spoonful poised, and certainly never mid-sip. Questions such as, is that celery root? Or what exactly is a consommé? Are best left unasked. No one knows, and it's impolite to remind the cook. Modern comparison. It's like eating soup on a first date, but your date is also your boss, your future in-laws, and a panel of judges from a televised cooking competition. You're not eating, you're performing for an audience of critics with the power to erase you from history. If you survive the soup course unscathed, congratulations. You have demonstrated patience, restraint, and a mastery of gravity. Should you find yourself craving that last stubborn spoonful at the bottom of the bowl, resist. There's honour in leaving a little behind, proof you are above such mortal hungers. Punchline. In the great dinner party of life, soup is just the beginning. One slurp and you're done for, but a silent, dignified sip may just get you invited back, at least until the fish course. Bread was not to be cut. No, you delicately broke off a piece and buttered it like a nervous surgeon. Spread the butter all at once? Savagery. Use your knife to cut. They'll write a letter to your mother. The bread plate is set to your left, a little satellite orbiting your main course, loaded with significance and hazard. The bread itself arrives, crusty and warm, passed down the table with the solemnity of an Olympic torch. Someone hands you the basket. Don't grab, don't reach. Accept it as if it's a gift from the Queen. 2 hands, polite smile, no sudden moves. You select your role, careful to avoid the largest, greedy or smallest. Suggests timidity. Then comes the butter, its own tableau of peril. The Victorians, suspicious of all things modern, including pre-sliced bread, insisted on the ceremony of breaking. You must tear off a modest bite-sized piece with your fingers, never your knife. Cutting bread is the equivalent of announcing you intend to eat the napkins next. Butter application is a study in restraint. You do not lather an entire half-roll in one bold sweep like you're prepping it for auction. Instead, you take the tiniest pad of butter, never, ever a hunk, deposit it gently on your plate, and only then, one bite at a time, do you touch butter to bread. This act is performed so delicately that a Victorian dinner table, viewed from above, resembles a field hospital of people tending invisible wounds. Should you falter and attempt to butter your whole slice at once, expect every eye to snap to your hands. The hostess may tighten her lips. Lady Agatha might cough in code. Sir Neville will make a mental note, ready for the next letter he pens to the Times. Bread manners in decline, a personal account. Your reputation as a civilized person, built over a lifetime, now dangles by a glutinous thread. There's a rhythm to this. Break, butter, eat, repeat. The goal is to look effortless, as though you grew up buttering bread in the dark while blindfolded, and certainly never learned otherwise from your scandalously practical grandmother. If you drop a crumb, you must pretend not to notice. Sweeping it away is strictly forbidden. Victorian tablecloths are for collecting secrets, not crumbs, and should you, in a fit of nervous energy, attempt to cut your bread with a knife? May God have mercy on your soul. A hush will fall over the table. Someone will recall the tragic story of Lord Bletchley, who once sliced a dinner roll in 1852 and was never seen again. The family rumour is he's still wandering the countryside, searching for forgiveness and uncut loaves. The butter itself is a social tightrope. Too much, and you're accused of excess. Too little, and your host will suspect you're making a silent protest against the dairy industry. If the butter is cold, you must not grunt or saw at it. Just wait for it to yield like the patience of a saint. If you're left with a stubbornly solid pat, it's a test of character. You must coax it into submission without recourse to violence or visible frustration. Modern comparison. Imagine eating tacos at a job interview, and the future of your career hinges on never spilling a single crumb. Or, it's like using your phone in a meeting. You know everyone's pretending not to notice, but rest assured, they're judging every swipe. Finally, when your plate is empty, you place your hands gently in your lap and look serene, as if you've just performed a sacred rite. You've survived the bread course, without scandal, without a letter home, and crucially, with your dignity intact. Punchline. In Victorian society, bread wasn't just a side dish, it was a character test. Fail, and you'll be toast. Pass, and you can quietly savour victory, one perfectly buttered bite at a time. Topics had to be light, so light they threatened to float away. Whether the Queen's health, or the new kind of pickle at Harrods, anything else, and you risk starting a scandal or, worse, political debate with the Earl of something or other. You sit down, napkin just so, hands poised, and realise you're not just here to eat, you're here to navigate the most perilous part of any Victorian dinner, conversation. The meal might have multiple courses, but the small talk is a never-ending amuse-bouche, and it can be even harder to digest. One misplaced comment and you're social toast, served cold and gossiped about until the next lunar eclipse. You glance at your neighbours, praying for an easy opener. Weather is the gold standard, a conversational safe zone so overused that it's considered an art form. Quite brisk for this time of year, you remark. The lady to your left nods solemnly, then embarks on a passionate 3-minute monologue about the east wind's effect on her hydrangeas. You nod, listening with the reverence of someone who has never met a hydrangea, but now suspects they have powerful opinions. If weather fails, the Queen's health is a close second, even if you haven't seen Her Majesty, and let's be honest, you haven't. It's always acceptable to murmur, "I do hope the Queen is keeping well." If your dinner companion launches into a theory about royal remedies involving honey and marmalade, you accept it as gospel, and do not, under any circumstances, ask for sources. And then there's the realm of new pickles at Harrods, a topic so bland, so gloriously devoid of controversy, it's practically designed for survival. Have you tried the new onion relish? No, but I hear Lady Fotheringay nearly fainted at the sharpness. Now you're safely afloat in the gentle river of polite conversation, each of you paddling as quietly as possible, careful not to make a single social splash. Stray outside these boundaries, and you're in shark-infested waters. Mention the slightest whiff of politics, and you risk a table-wide argument involving dueling monocles and withering asides about tariff reform. Ask after someone's investments, and the temperature drops 10 degrees. Even art, that supposed safe haven, can backfire. Do you enjoy Turner? Well, my brother-in-law was once insulted by a Turner, so we don't mention them. The true danger lies in thinking you can innovate. The temptation is real. You want to be remembered. You want to stand out. But Victorian etiquette is a fortress built to withstand originality. Tell an amusing story. It had better involve a minor animal mishap, a distant relation, and absolutely no mention of the lower classes or French food. Try a joke? Good luck. The punchline is never as funny as the silence that follows. You quickly learn to master the art of listening, head tilted at the right angle, mouth set in a polite half-smile. If you're lucky, you'll get through the entire course without being asked your opinion on colonial tariffs or the regrettable incident with the garden hose. If the conversation lags, you reach for the ultimate fallback. I wonder what the soup will be tonight. Someone will have an opinion, and you are saved. Modern comparison. Imagine trying to keep a group chat going at a family holiday, but every topic is a landmine, and the only acceptable emojis are clouds, crowns, and a single sad pickle. As the course changes and the plates are cleared, you relax slightly. You've survived small talk, learned 3 new weather facts, and heard more about pickled onions than you ever thought possible. You glance around the table, noting that everyone else seems equally relieved, equally exhausted, and equally grateful that politics, at least for now, remains unspoken. Punchline. In Victorian small talk, the best you can hope for is to be both forgettable and uncontroversial. A conversational souffle, risen just enough to avoid collapse. Most communication was non-verbal. Eyebrow twitches, finger flicks, subtle coughs. Entire conversations happened under the radar, and you had to decode whether Lady Beatrice was inviting you to speak or plotting your social demise. Victorian dinner parties operated on 2 levels. There was the spoken script, light, fluffy, risk-averse. But underneath, a whole shadow play unfolded in glances, gestures, and signals so subtle, you'd need a field guide and a magnifying glass just to keep up. You'd been warned by friends. Don't get caught unprepared. The real game is in the body language. It starts with the eyes. Across the table, Lord Featherstone arches an eyebrow, just slightly. Is he intrigued by your comment about the Queen's hydrangeas, or did you just accidentally insult his entire family line? You respond with a neutral smile and the faintest nod, hoping you haven't signed up for a midnight duel. The hands are next. A deft flick of a gloved finger toward the bread basket means please pass the bread, but add a barely there tap of the pinky and it becomes, let's discuss Lady Tremble's unfortunate hat. A napkin refolded for the third time is a silent distress call. Save me from this conversation about beetles. Cough once and it's nerves. Cough twice and the table braces for scandal. There's so much going on below the surface, you half expect someone to start tapping out SOS in Morse code with their dessert fork. Even posture is fraught. If Sir Basil leans back with his arms crossed, he's unimpressed. If he's leaning in, elbows on the table, gasp, he's either truly captivated or moments away from causing an incident. You keep your own pose in careful check, wishing you'd practiced your attentive but not desperate position in the mirror beforehand. The masters of this secret code are the older ladies, veterans of hundreds of dinner parties, capable of carrying on full, cutting dialogues without uttering a word. Lady Beatrice, in particular, is a legend. One subtle arch of her left brow, and half the table falls silent. A single cough from her and a servant appears, carrying something you didn't know you needed. When she turns her gaze on you and gives the faintest half smile, you panic. Is she about to invite you into the conversation, or suggest you're wearing last season's cufflinks? Of course, the danger comes in misreading these signals. A nervous twitch mistaken for a subtle rebuke can lead to a spiral of apology and overcompensation. A mistaken wink is social suicide, especially if you accidentally aim it at the vicar. Every moment feels like you're navigating a battlefield blindfolded, armed only with a shaky grasp of facial calisthenics. Then there are the alliances and rivalries. Across the table, two cousins exchange glances as someone begins yet another story about the Crimean War. A stifled yawn is met with a sharp look. Sleepiness here is an accusation. Two guests tap their fingers in tandem, orchestrating a silent conspiracy to divert the conversation from politics to safer ground. The weather, perhaps, or the merits of boiled mutton. Modern comparison, it's like group texting under the table while pretending not to, or sitting in a board meeting where everyone's real opinions are being broadcast in emoji face, but nobody dares speak up. The only difference? In the Victorian era, the emojis were real people, and the repercussions could last a lifetime. By the time the next course is served, you realise you've barely eaten, too busy interpreting eyebrow lifts and decoding sighs. Every little gesture is loaded, every silence a potential crisis or an unspoken compliment. Punchline. In Victorian society, you didn't need to speak to make your point. You just needed excellent peripheral vision, nerves of steel, and if you were smart, very, very expressive eyebrows. Fish required its own fork and knife, neither of which worked. If you couldn't debone your soul with elegance, you risked sending a flying fish spine onto the bishop's lap. Only the strong survived. You brace yourself as the butler appears, bearing a platter of fish so beautifully arranged it seems a shame to attack it. Yet attack it you must, for this is no ordinary meal, it's the Victorian fish course, a rite of passage fraught with more peril than a regatta in a thunderstorm. The utensils are your first obstacle. The fish knife, with its odd rounded edge and subtle point, looks less like a tool and more like a riddle from a particularly cruel children's book. The matching fork, flatter and wider than any fork has a right to be, is cold comfort when faced with a steaming, slippery fillet. The rules dictate you may never, ever use your regular knife. Doing so is a social felony. Instead, you must wield these delicate instruments as if born to them, though in truth you suspect they were designed to make you look foolish. You begin, as all do, by attempting to gently separate the delicate flesh from its bony prison. The goal is to remove each bone with the quiet skill of a Victorian surgeon, one who's not allowed to leave a scar. But the soul seems determined to fight back, its invisible bones lurking like traps beneath the surface. A single false move and a silvery pin bone launches from your plate, arcing across the linen. In a less refined household, you could retrieve it and laugh it off. Here you freeze, praying no one noticed, especially not the bishop, who is quietly dabbing his lap with the resignation of a man who has seen too much. Conversation stalls as everyone turns their attention to their own plates, each guest locked in mortal combat with their fillet. You glance around for a model of composure, but even Lady Euphemia, rumoured to have been born holding a fish fork, struggles. One guest attempts to use their fingers, a tactic that would lead to immediate exile, or worse, a subtle note of concern delivered by the host's butler on a silver tray. The sauce is its own minefield. A lemon wedge glistens innocently, but one careless squeeze and the juice arcs into your neighbour's wine. If you dare try the tartar sauce, you must do so with grace, taking care not to upend the fragile balance of your fish and cause a small culinary landslide. And the smell. No matter how fresh the fish, there's always the faint aroma of the seaside, a whiff that mingles with candle wax and the distant anxiety of 20 guests hoping to survive this course with their dignity intact. The Victorians, in their wisdom, pretended not to notice, even as they sprinkled parsley with the precision of jewellers examining diamonds. Modern comparison. Imagine being given a plate of barbecue ribs at a white tie gala, armed with only a plastic spork and the gaze of 100 Michelin-starred chefs. Every move you make is a gamble. The best you can do is soldier on, extracting bones with a blend of caution, optimism, and the unwavering hope that the next bite will be entirely fish, not a surprise splinter of Victorian embarrassment. As the plates are finally cleared, yours suspiciously tidy, despite a small pile of bones tucked under a wilted sprig of parsley, you exhale. You've made it through, though perhaps not unscathed. The fish course has claimed many a reputation, and tonight it's claimed at least one waistcoat and the last shreds of your confidence. Punchline. In the end, the real lesson of the Victorian fish course is simple. Never trust a dinner party that provides special tools for just one dish, and never, ever sit within splashing distance of the bishop. There were as many wine glasses as there were existential doubts. Accept every glass and risk public inebriation. Decline, and you're a Puritan. Clink the wrong way, and you might accidentally propose marriage to the vicar's wife. It begins before you even sit down. A glittering array of glasses greets you like a glassware convention. Tall, slender, round-bowled, flute-like, each one destined for a different varietal and a different potential social catastrophe. You scan your settings, attempting to recall the difference between claret and burgundy, and just how many sips one can take before the butler starts tallying. The wine service itself is a ritual. A footman glides in, bottle-angled for display, label visible in case you wish to pretend you understand the vineyard. The host murmurs an approving "ah," and suddenly you're being poured a modest inch, never a full glass, of something that smells faintly of hedgerow and old secrets. This is not an opportunity to hydrate. It's a test of your ability to swirl, sniff, and sip without wincing, gasping, or announcing, "Oh, that's interesting," which is code for "this tastes like varnish." There's a pace to the pouring, a rhythm that no one explains. Red follows white, except when it doesn't. The port arrives in its own stately procession. You're meant to accept each offering graciously, declining only if you want to be known as that person for the rest of the season. Accept every pour, however, and you'll soon be clutching your napkin like a lifeline and waxing poetic about the window drapes. The goal is to hover in a state of gentle conviviality, never so sober you seem ungrateful, never so tipsy you start reenacting scenes from Hamlet. Each glass has its own rules. White wine is held by the stem, red by the bowl, poured by some mysterious logic that seems to change depending on the longitude. If you pick up the wrong glass, there will be a brief stunned silence, followed by the quiet shuffle of place cards as everyone reconsiders your character. To toast, you must make eye contact, tilt at precisely the right angle, and clink with a delicacy reserved for baptisms and peace treaties. A clink too hearty can send your wine sloshing into a neighbour's lap. A clink too faint and the host suspects you're plotting sedition or even worse, are a teetotaler. The actual drinking is a ballet of moderation. You must never drain your glass in a single go unless you want the butler to offer you a refill and a pamphlet about temperance. Nor should you leave it untouched lest your host believe their wine cellar is wasted on you. The Victorians measured virtue in sips, not in gulps or abstinence. And then there are the hazards. The passing of the port, a tradition as convoluted as it is perilous. The bottle travels to the left, always, pausing only if someone wants to inspect the label or, legend has it, challenge another guest to a duel. If you interrupt its circuit, the table freezes. Should you absent-mindedly pass it to the right, the host's eyebrow arches by a millimetre, a subtle sign you've joined the legions of the socially doomed. Modern comparison. It's like showing up at a tech mixer and being offered a flight of artisanal kombucha, each with its own glass, and the unspoken expectation you know what mouthfeel means. If you accidentally toast with your water glass, you'll be remembered, just not fondly. By the end of the course, you've balanced 6 glasses, remembered 3 toasts, and avoided confessing your undying love to anyone's spouse. Your dignity is intact, your glassware unbroken. Punchline. In Victorian wine service, the true vintage is anxiety, bottled and poured with every course. Raise your glass carefully and hope for the best. Every Victorian meal contained something gelatinous, calves' feet, eel, or something ominously called mould. Your job, eat it, smile, and pretend this was normal, all while wondering if food should ever wobble that much. The parade of aspics begins innocently enough. You spy a shimmering mound of translucent jelly, studded with suspicious cubes of carrot, an island of hard-boiled egg floating forlornly near the top. The butler presents it as if unveiling a masterpiece. Mould of calves' feet, madam? You blink, unsure whether to be impressed or call for help. Victorian cooks prided themselves on their ability to turn anything, absolutely anything, into a gelatinous marvel. Fish, meat, vegetables, fruit, even the occasional chicken, no ingredient was safe from the transformative power of boiled collagen and ambition. The theory was that if you could eat it solid, you could also enjoy it in a state of strategic quiver. You accept a wobbly slice onto your plate, noting its silent threat. The texture is unsettling, neither quite liquid nor solid, and possessed of an uncanny ability to slither when you prod it with your fork. The surface glistens under the gaslight, refracting your look of horror into 1,000 tiny faces. You take a tentative bite. The taste? Somewhere between unflavoured marshmallow and faint regret, with a top note of boiled something. You smile as your molars meet resistance that nature never intended. Conversation continues around you as if nothing is amiss. Guests chat breezily about the merits of the new railway, all the while dispatching their aspic with the grim efficiency of seasoned survivors. You try not to let your expression betray the existential dread blooming inside. The trick is to eat slowly, alternating between tiny nibbles and sips of wine, until enough of the dish has disappeared to avoid suspicion. Should you hesitate or, worse, push the jelly aside, the consequences are severe. A sharp-eyed aunt will notice. The host will gently inquire, is it not to your taste? And you must protest that it is divine, possibly the highlight of your year. Meanwhile, a cousin at the far end will whisper that you have never quite appreciated the subtleties of eel in aspic, a failing that, in Victorian society, ranks just below grand larceny. Sometimes the jelly harbours surprises, a hidden sprig of parsley, a stray caper, or, if fortune truly abandons you, a cold sliver of ham lurking in the depths. You chew cautiously, every mouthful an adventure. For dessert there may even be a sweet mould. Imagine an over-ambitious blancmange, delicately flavoured with rosewater, presented in a shape that defies both geometry and digestion. The Victorians believed that jelly was a sign of culinary sophistication, proof that your kitchen boasted both skilled servants and the patience to boil bones for hours. Jellied dishes grace the tables of the wealthy and aspirational, a social signal in shimmering, quivering form, no matter that most guests approached them with a blend of curiosity and abject fear. Modern comparison. Imagine going to a trendy new restaurant, only to find every course is served encased in jello. The chef beams as you attempt to cut your steak, which slides off your plate and attempts escape. You survive, just barely, and wash down the last mouthful with an extra sip of wine. A glance around the table reveals similar faces of polite resignation. You are not alone. Every guest knows the unwritten rule. You do not criticize the aspic. You simply persevere with courage, dignity, and the hope that the next course will remain blessedly solid. Punchline. In the end, Victorian dinner parties taught a simple lesson. If your food wobbles more than you do, it's best to smile, swallow, and trust that history will forgive your silent scream. Meals lasted hours. The second entree arrived with all the excitement of tax season. You practiced looking interested while slowly starving, as your neighbour described the migration patterns of geese in excruciating detail. By now, the first wave of hunger has faded into a dull ache, replaced by the numbing realization that Victorian dining is not a sprint but a marathon punctuated by the relentless chime of silverware and the droning hum of inconsequential conversation. The second entree, a dish inevitably described as hearty by the host, appears on your plate. It is always brown, always mysterious, and always just tepid enough to encourage contemplation of your life choices. You try to identify what, exactly, you are eating. Is it mutton? Venison? A root vegetable pressed into the shape of yesterday's regret? The sauce is as thick as the atmosphere and twice as heavy. You watch it congeal, wishing you could slip it into your napkin and pass it off as an early course in plate art. Your neighbour, meanwhile, is deep into a story about geese. Not just any geese. Migratory patterns, beak curvature, the benefits of letting them graze on the south lawn. You nod politely, the muscles in your face beginning to twitch from overuse. With every new avian anecdote, you master the ancient art of the attentive stare, your mind gently floating away to thoughts of soft beds, quiet libraries, and food you can recognise on sight. You glance down the table, searching for signs of hope. The eldest uncle is nodding off mid-spoonful. Across from you, Lady Bramwell blinks in Morse code, her eyelids signalling, "Save me." The host's terrier has dozed off under the table, clearly a veteran of such events. In Victorian dining, boredom was an art form, an elegant, slow-motion collapse of enthusiasm. It wasn't just permitted, it was expected. You learned to perform interest with the discipline of an actor in an endless stage production. You could be starving, lost in a fog of hunger and confusion, but outwardly you radiated the calm patience of a saint waiting for canonization. Every detail of the meal is designed to stretch time. The conversation must never rise above a gentle murmur. The food, served at a speed best described as glacial, arrives course by course, each dish separated by just enough interval to make you question whether you imagined the last one. A single candle flickers. The only thing moving faster than the gravy is your hope. You look for distractions, the patterns on the china, the shadow of the chandelier swinging ever so slightly, the slow progress of a particularly ambitious breadcrumb across the tablecloth. You attempt to change the subject, but the room's collective inertia is unstoppable. Geese lead to ducks lead to swans, and before you know it, you're hearing about the time a family of herons nested in the neighbour's hatbox. Modern comparison, it's like sitting through a 3-hour corporate training session on the history of staplers, punctuated by tiny, unsatisfying snacks and the knowledge that asking to leave is a career-ending move. The key to survival is patience and the occasional clandestine nibble of bread. You take solace in the knowledge that everyone at the table is suffering equally, their souls quietly pleading for dessert or, at the very least, a change of topic. And when the plates are finally cleared, there is a subtle, collective exhale. Relief not at being fed, but at having survived the conversational gauntlet. Punchline. In Victorian dining, boredom wasn't just endured, it was ritualized. And if you made it through the second entree without weeping into your gravy, you earned your place among the quietly heroic. If you dropped a fork, you did not pick it up. That was the butler's job. Touch it, and you'd be labelled new money. Accidentally launch a knife under the table, and you'll be remembered as that clumsy American forever. In the delicate ballet of a Victorian dinner party, the sound of a utensil clattering to the floor was the equivalent of a record scratch at a royal ball. Conversations paused, heads turned, eyebrows arched high enough to threaten the structural integrity of the room. Somewhere, a distant relative shuddered, and you felt the ghost of your ancestors collectively sigh. You freeze, mortified, as your dessert fork completes its Olympic tumble, landing somewhere near the footman's shoes. The rules are clear. You do not, under any circumstances, reach for the fallen implement. This isn't your grandmother's kitchen. This is social survival, and the floor now belongs to the staff. There's a ritual to the aftermath. You maintain a studied calm, hands above the table, eyes fixed forward, as if nothing out of the ordinary has occurred. The butler appears with uncanny speed, silently retrieving the rogue utensil and whisking it away to be replaced with a spotless, freshly polished substitute. No words are exchanged, but a lifetime of judgment is delivered in a single, respectful nod. You murmur a soft thank you, careful not to overdo it, lest anyone think you're grateful for the assistance of the help. In Victorian society, gratitude must be as understated as possible, ideally not visible at all. The real danger isn't the loss of the fork, but the loss of face. If you try to retrieve the utensil yourself, the fallout is instant. you will be marked forever as someone unfamiliar with the proper way, a social climber, an arriviste, or, worst of all, American. The stories will linger. Remember that evening at the Blakeney's when someone crawled under the table for a spoon? Scandalous. These are the tales that outlast empires. The horror escalates if the incident involves a knife. Launching one beneath the table could have disastrous consequences. At best, it's a breach of etiquette. At worst, you've started a minor diplomatic incident involving someone's ankle. There are whispered legends about Lady Merton's soiree of 1872, when a guest's butter knife skittered across the parquet, nearly tripping the vicar and setting off a cascade of cutlery so extensive the entire evening had to be reclassified as performance art. There's also the social math of who witnesses your blunder. Did the host notice? Did the neighbouring duchess? Did the cousin with a column in the local paper? The more important the observer, the longer your shame will echo. A dropped utensil in the presence of a dowager countess guarantees at least a decade of subtle snubs and dinner invitations that never quite arrive. Modern comparison: imagine spilling your drink on your boss's laptop during a company party, then instinctively grabbing a napkin to clean it, only to be told in a whisper that there's a special emergency team for that sort of thing. Every action is loaded with meaning, and the real mistake isn't the spill, but trying to fix it yourself. To cope, some guests adopt the strategic denial approach. Pretend it never happened. Smile serenely and carry on, even as the missing fork is quietly replaced. Others develop a zen-like focus, gripping utensils as if their lives depend on it, knuckles white, smiles fixed. The truly anxious opt for finger food just to be safe. Punchline: in the end, the fallen utensil is more than a simple slip. It's a test of poise, privilege, and self-restraint. In Victorian dining, what matters isn't whether you drop the fork, but how you recover. And remember, the floor belongs to the butler. Always. Toasting was a minefield. Too enthusiastic, and you're a drunk. Too reserved, and you're accused of plotting sedition. You raised your glass with the right amount of gravity and hoped no one asked you to make a speech. The first hint that toasting is about to begin comes when the host lifts their glass, and everyone's posture sharpens by half an inch. It's not just about clinking crystal. It's an ancient ceremony, equal parts celebration, anxiety and high-wire act, where every flicker of an eyelid is loaded with meaning. The Victorians may have preferred their emotions hidden, but their toasts were a rare, perilous window into what passed for communal spirit. You glance at your array of glasses, trying to guess which one to pick up. Wine for a formal toast, port for the truly solemn, champagne for an occasion, and never, ever the water goblet, unless you want to risk being labelled a dissenter, a heretic, or, worst of all, a health enthusiast. You grip the glass by the stem, not too tightly. No one wants to see a sherry shower. Not too loose. The risk of gravity is ever present. The host begins with a time-honoured formula: to friends, old and new. There's a ripple of polite anticipatory nodding as everyone prepares to raise their glasses in unison. Timing is everything. Rise too early, and you look over-eager. Too late, and you might as well be plotting a coup in the conservatory. The secret is to move as one, an elegant human metronome perfectly synchronized by the terror of getting it wrong. Then comes the clink. Victorian etiquette dictates you make eye contact during the tap, but not too much. Linger and it's intimate. Glance away and it's cold. The clink itself must be gentle, a whisper of sound rather than a chime. If you manage to send a crystal glass spinning, you'll be remembered in family legend as the one who toppled the Tower of Port. As the glasses meet, a collective exhale ripples around the table, an unspoken prayer that no one will be called upon to speak. But sometimes disaster strikes. A guest, often emboldened by the previous 7 courses and 3 glasses of dubious vintage, decides to offer a toast of their own. Heads swivel, the air thickens. The impromptu speaker rises, glass raised, and everyone else tries to look encouraging, while silently praying for brevity and no mention of politics, geese, or family scandals. If you are the unlucky soul called upon to respond, your job is simple. Say something gracious, humble, and short. Avoid humour unless you are a natural or prepared to be remembered for all the wrong reasons. Any reference to love, loyalty, or the Queen is a safe bet. Conclude with a smile, raise your glass, and take the smallest possible sip. Too big a gulp, and you're lively. Too small, and you're cold. It's a game without a scoreboard, but everyone knows who's winning. Modern comparison: Imagine giving a toast at a wedding, knowing there's a live Twitter feed, a panel of etiquette judges, and your job review riding on your ability not to make puns or spill a single drop. Of course, sometimes mistakes happen. A glass is knocked, a speech runs long, someone quotes Latin and is met with universal confusion. In the end, it's not perfection that's remembered, but poise in the face of disaster. If you can laugh lightly at yourself, you might just earn a rare ripple of genuine amusement, the closest thing to a standing ovation at a Victorian dinner. Punchline. In the end, a successful toast is less about the words or the wine, and more about surviving the ritual with dignity. Raise your glass, toast the moment, and pray you're not called upon again until dessert. With so many bodies packed into a candlelit room, scent management was critical. Too much perfume? Suffocating. Too little? Everyone knows what you had for lunch yesterday. There was a science to not smelling like a stables. As you take your seat, the first thing that hits you isn't the aroma of roast beef or the delicate steam rising from the soup. It's a complex, invisible cloud of competing fragrances. The room hums with nervous energy, and top notes of lavender, rose, and something that could be bay rum, or possibly just disappointment. Each guest is a tiny scented satellite, orbiting around the hope that they're neither too bold nor too bland. Victorians feared body odour the way modern people fear Wi-Fi outages. With indoor plumbing, a luxury, and central heating just a rumour, everyone knew that personal freshness was negotiable at best. The solution? Layered scent defences. Ladies doused their handkerchiefs in floral water, gentlemen anointed their whiskers with oils, and everyone sprinkled themselves with powders like sugar on a cake you secretly resent. There were rules, of course. Perfume should be subtle, a hint, not a headline. One dab at each wrist, the etiquette guides insisted, and a discreet touch behind the ear. Anything more, and you risked being compared to a French courtesan, which, while flattering in Paris, was social death in Surrey. Conversely, going unscented was a confession. Too natural, whispered the matriarchs. He must bathe by the moon. You scan the guests, nose twitching at the battlefield before you. Across the table, Lady Plumworth has chosen violets, a safe bet but applied with the enthusiasm of someone painting a barn. Sir Reginald's cologne, a mixture of musk and ambition, is less a personal statement and more a declaration of war. Somewhere in the middle is the ideal, clean, pleasant, and just faintly mysterious, like you've recently walked through a field of blooming roses while contemplating life's regrets. And then, the hazards. The candles flicker, heating the room and amplifying every fragrance. What began as a polite chorus becomes an olfactory riot. You dab discreetly at your brow, wondering if the hint of onions is from your neighbour, or a cruel reminder of last week's stew. Sometimes, a rogue draught sends a wave of odour livestock your way, a reminder that, yes, you are still only one wall away from an actual horse. If a guest faltered in their scent strategy, the room responded with devastating efficiency. Too pungent, and neighbours would edge away, waving their napkins in accidental breezes. Too subtle, and you'd notice a cluster of aunts whispering behind their fans, noses wrinkled in unified judgment. Sometimes a particularly strong perfume could spark an entire dinner table migration, with guests shifting seats for a better view and ending up suspiciously close to the open window. Modern comparison. Imagine attending a packed elevator meeting, each person sporting a different signature scent, and the only thing worse than the blend of pine, patchouli and panic is the realization that you are the reason the doors keep opening for air. There were even fragrance fads. One season, everyone wore eau de cologne, crisp, lemony, inoffensive. Next year the rage was Hungary water, a recipe involving rosemary, myrtle and the slow death of your sinuses. Fashion dictated not just the scent but the manner of application. Scented gloves, perfumed hair ribbons, even the occasional boutonniere stuffed with mint to be surreptitiously sniffed during the more pungent courses. As dessert arrives and the air grows thick, you say a silent prayer for fresh air and perhaps a small cleansing rain. You've survived the perfume wars, emerging with your dignity, if not your sinuses, intact. Punchline. In the Victorian dining room, scent was more than etiquette. It was survival. Too much, too little, or just plain wrong, and you'd be remembered long after the soufflé was gone. When in doubt, carry a lemon and keep your powder dry. The main course was usually something roasted, carved with the flair of a surgeon and the subtlety of a lumberjack. Your goal? Eat neatly, don't get gravy on your gloves, and above all, avoid choking on a wishbone during small talk. The arrival of the main course is the event everyone pretends to greet with casual indifference, while secretly praying that it's at least warm and somewhat identifiable. A grand procession begins. The roast, be it beef, mutton, or for the truly ambitious, an entire peacock, arrives at the table, trailing a small entourage of hopeful sauces and battered side dishes. The host, armed with a carving knife that could double as a fencing foil, stands ready to perform the evening's most public act of dexterity. The air thickens with anticipation and a light misting of steam. All eyes are on the carving. Too much vigour and the roast shreds into carnage, flinging morsels at passing footmen. Too little force, and the meat remains stubbornly intact, requiring strategic negotiation with the backbone and a silent prayer to St. Anthony of lost causes. The perfect slice is an art form, a balance between surgical precision and the brute force of a lumberjack, and is rewarded with murmured approval and the occasional raised eyebrow from Lady Chumley, who still remembers the mutton massacre of '63. Your plate arrives, laden with more protein than you can politely handle. There's a mountain of roast, a tumble of potatoes, and if the cook is feeling optimistic, a suspiciously glossy turnip. Your first hurdle, bones. Victorian cooks believed in a nose-to-tail philosophy, and your portion is sure to contain at least 3 kinds of cartilage and a wishbone with a personal vendetta. You begin the dance of dinner, navigating meat and bone with fork and knife, striving for grace. Every slip, every splatter, is a potential mark against your name in the great ledger of social success. Gravy is next, the great equalizer and destroyer. Ladled from a dish so ornate it probably has a dowry, the sauce arrives steaming, fragrant and alarmingly mobile. The trick is to pour enough to add flavour, but not so much that your plate becomes a slip and slide. One rogue drip on your gloves, or worse, the tablecloth, and you'll be remembered as the one who ruined the centrepiece with a gravy tidal wave. Should disaster strike, you are to ignore it with the stoicism of a seasoned dinner guest. Never blot, never scrape, simply soldier on. All the while you must maintain pleasant conversation, the very picture of composure. This is easier said than done when you're soaring through sinew while nodding earnestly at your neighbour's story about their nephew's prize-winning goose. You attempt a well-timed laugh, only to find yourself perilously close to inhaling a fragment of wishbone. Cough discreetly, signal for more wine, and pray to all available saints. Modern comparison. It's like eating ribs at a job interview, wearing a white suit, while being graded on both your technique and your ability to critique the floral arrangements. The meal proceeds at a stately pace, each bite a negotiation between hunger, etiquette, and the structural realities of Victorian butchery. You may lose a forkful or two to the battlefield, but as long as nothing hits the host or requires retrieval from your lap, you're surviving. By the time the plates are cleared, your gloves are only lightly spotted, your dignity mostly intact, and you've escaped the worst of the bone pile. Punchline. In the end, the main course is less about nourishment and more about endurance. If you finish without needing medical attention or a new pair of gloves, you've already won Victorian dining's highest honour, survival. By dessert you were exhausted and dangerously close to saying something honest. This was when everyone's masks slipped just a little, enough to reveal who actually liked whom, and who was plotting to never invite you back. After hours of social acrobatics, cutlery crises, and surviving no less than 3 different animal proteins, dessert arrives like a slightly unhinged reward. The plates are cleared, the silver is reset, and the air is thick with a mixture of relief, anticipation, and the scent of caramelized sugar. This is the last course, the final act, and the moment where the real drama unfolds, coated in syrup and dusted with powdered secrets. The dishes themselves are masterpieces of ambition and edible engineering. Towers of sponge cake teeter under the weight of cream and candied violets. Trifles glimmer in cut glass bowls, layered so meticulously you could use them as a geological timeline. Puddings arrive steaming and boozy, threatening to collapse if you so much as look at them wrong. And then, the pièce de résistance, the sponge sugar sculpture, a testament to human achievement and the fleeting nature of dental health. You eye the serving spoon, calculating your odds. Etiquette dictates you wait to be offered, but by now everyone is just a little slower, a little looser, perhaps one glass of port past their composure. It's a delicate race between looking too eager, greedy, and not eager enough, suspicious. At the end of the table, someone jokes about the time they dropped an entire pudding on the bishop's lap. A story greeted with a round of genuine weary laughter and one or two nervous glances toward the nearest clergyman. Conversations, finally sweetened by sugar and fatigue, turn more candid. You hear snippets, Lady Minton's pointed comments about the length of someone's engagement, Lord Plimpton's slightly tipsy confession that he actually despises blancmange but adores the cook. Old grievances resurface, carefully sugared and served under the guise of compliments. What a daring sauce, Mrs. Tillingham. Only you would be brave enough to use so much nutmeg. The table becomes a swirling mix of genuine affection, rivalry, and the kind of honesty that only emerges after surviving an evening of Victorian dining. Meanwhile, the dessert course brings out the competitive spirit. There are unspoken rules about portion size, seconds, and even how loudly one may praise the cook. Take too much, and you're labelled as uncouth. Take too little, and the cook will nurse the slight for weeks. A guest passes up the pudding claiming doctor's orders, and immediately the rumour mill begins. Is it gout, heartbreak, or a covert dislike of candied peel? Modern comparison. It's like the last half hour of a wedding reception, when everyone's guard drops, shoes are kicked off under the table, and the real opinions, and maybe a few unfiltered truths, begin to emerge. Only in this case, the dance floor is replaced by a second helping of trifle and whispered scandal. As the coffee and petits fours make the rounds, the atmosphere is lighter, but the alliances and betrayals of the evening are quietly catalogued. Who passed the cream with a sigh? Who laughed too loudly at the host's story? Who will be re-invited? And who is already being crossed off the guest list, their fate sealed by a single spilled syllabub? Punchline. In the end, dessert at a Victorian dinner party was never just about sugar. It was about survival. If you made it through with your reputation, your secrets, and a clean napkin, you could consider yourself a true connoisseur of sweet endings and social intrigue. Cheese was both a final treat and a test of digestion. Strong enough to clean wallpaper, it separated the true Victorians from the faint-hearted. Nibble politely and pretend you're not imagining a Tums. By the time the cheese course arrives, the meal has already spanned most of your adult life. You've weathered the aspic, survived the roast, endured the trifle, and now you are face to face with the most formidable opponent yet, the cheese board. It glides down the table on a silver tray, groaning under the weight of British dairy ambition and a few imported threats from France. The host gestures with pride, a selection of the finest, all local, except for the Roquefort, of course. You peer at a bewildering array of wedges, rounds, and crumbling blocks, each one advertising its presence with a scent best described as agricultural. Stilton, blue-veined and assertive, sits beside a waxy cheddar hard enough to double as a doorstop. There's a Lancashire so crumbly it could be used as gravel, and a wheel of camembert that's quietly trying to escape the platter. The real contest begins when the host carves off a generous chunk and offers it your way. There's etiquette to this. You must never take too much, but too little suggests you lack backbone, or, worse, that you don't understand the importance of dairy and national identity. You select a polite wedge, careful not to grimace as the aroma envelops you like a thick invisible shawl. Accompaniments arrive, a basket of dry biscuits, a cluster of grapes, a single wrinkled apple. The biscuits are intentionally flavourless, designed to serve as both a palate cleanser and, in dire cases, a neutralising agent. You alternate nibbles, employing every ounce of restraint to avoid letting your eyes water. The conversation falters as everyone navigates the minefield of flavours, determined to seem appreciative and not at all alarmed by the cheese's personality. The bravest guests opt for seconds, dabbing sweat from their brows with monogrammed handkerchiefs, uttering polite noises that might be approval or coded cries for help. The cheese board moves on, leaving in its wake a trail of half-eaten rinds, wiped mouths and whispered speculation about which unfortunate ancestor invented the more aggressive varieties. Strong cheese was a matter of pride for Victorians, a symbol of endurance and a subtle way to test guests' fortitude. The ability to nibble a wedge of Stilton without recoiling marked you as a true member of polite society. The inability to do so might see you branded as weak, French-leaning, or, worst of all, delicate. The cheese course is also the final opportunity for tableside confession. "I do adore a blue," someone ventures, only to be met with the horrified silence of those who've just tasted it for the first time. You nod, trying to seem wise and well-travelled, even as you mentally compile a list of local pharmacies. More grapes? Yes, please. Another biscuit? Absolutely. Anything to chase away the lingering bite. Modern comparison. Imagine a hot sauce tasting at a professional meeting, each round ramping up the heat, and the only rule is to keep smiling, even as your soul leaves your body and your tongue pleads for mercy. When the cheese board finally departs, you relax, palate battered, dignity intact. You survived. The hardest part is over. Soon you'll be sipping coffee and swapping sanitized stories about the evening's delights, grateful that the true test of the Victorian dinner party is now behind you. Punchline. In the end, the cheese course wasn't just about flavour, it was about fortitude. If you left the table upright and breathing, you were not just a guest, but a survivor. The meal wasn't over until everyone had moved to the parlour for coffee, tea, and a final round of carefully whispered gossip. This was where reputations were cemented, or quietly obliterated. After hours in the dining room social crucible, the promise of withdrawing to the parlour sounds like an escape, until you realise it's merely the next stage of battle, with fresher cushions and hotter beverages. The men peel away for port and cigars, or so they claim, but anyone left in the drawing room knows the real fireworks are about to start. A symphony of porcelain cups, clinking silver spoons, and the gentle hiss of the samovar sets the scene for the evening's last and most dangerous sport. Postprandial conversation. Servants glide through the parlour with trays offering tiny potent cups of coffee that threaten to undo hours of attempted relaxation, or fragrant tea strong enough to stand a spoon in. The smell of burnt sugar and lemon peel floats in the air, mingling with the unmistakable aroma of secrets about to be spilled. Everyone shifts seats, forming new alliances. Sofas creak under the weight of barely suppressed opinions. You select your beverage with the tactical shrewdness of a chess master. Coffee if you need to stay alert, tea if you want to project calm innocence, herbal infusion if you're feeling faint or wish to appear mysterious. The conversation, liberated by the promise of sleep on the horizon, grows more candid. No longer bound by the rigid etiquette of the dinner table, guests lean in closer, voices drop to conspiratorial whispers, and fans flutter with renewed intensity. Someone asks if you enjoyed the aspic, with a glint in their eye that says they know you didn't. Another guest remarks on Lady Rivington's remarkable choice of hat feathers, which is universally understood as absurd and possibly dangerous to birds. Here, gossip is the social glue and the weapon of choice. Every compliment is edged with implication. Every anecdote is a test balloon for future rumour. The recent elopement of a neighbour's niece is dissected with forensic interest. The rector's sermon is compared unfavourably to last year's, and speculation bubbles about Lord Abernathy's absence. Gout is the official story, but everyone knows better. You sip your tea, smile demurely, and try to remember who, exactly, is allied with whom this week. The parlour becomes a stage for social survival. The clever guests steer the conversation towards safe territory, botany, pets, the weather. Then, with a twinkle, slip in a barb or two disguised as innocent queries. Do you think the dessert was overset? My mother always said a trembling pudding means a trembling cook. Eyes dart, laughter erupts, and someone gently stirs their coffee as if nothing untoward has happened. Modern comparison. It's like the after-party at a corporate retreat, where everyone pretends to let their hair down, but the networking never really stops, and every joke is both a handshake and a subtle threat. Meanwhile, the night wears on. Coffee cups are drained, teapots emptied, and the boundaries of politeness tested one last time. As yawns are stifled and guests begin to collect their gloves and hats, the host's reputation is weighed in the balance. Was the evening delightful, or merely memorable? Will the tale of the soup course make the rounds in morning parlours, or will the scandal of the cheese board eclipse all else? You glance around, realising that what you say now may determine your next invitation, or your quiet exile. The final pleasantries are exchanged, and you find yourself both exhausted and oddly exhilarated. You have, against the odds, survived the Nightcap Olympics. Punchline. In Victorian society, the real dessert was gossip, best served hot, with a side of plausible deniability. If you can sip, smile, and slip away before becoming tomorrow's headline, you've mastered the game. Leaving was an ordeal. You had to thank the host at exactly the right decibel, retrieve your outerwear without tripping, and exit with the dignity of someone who didn't just eat aspic. One wrong step, and you'd never see the inside of a decent dining room again. The first challenge is timing. Depart too early and you're clearly desperate to escape. Were you bored? Offended? The rumours will start before you reach the garden gate. Stay too late, and you risk being gently but firmly nudged out by a butler brandishing a candle and an air of exhausted civility. The sweet spot is impossible to locate, shifting according to your proximity to the host, the amount of cheese you consumed, and whether your anecdotes improved or deteriorated as the night wore on. You rise from the sofa, surreptitiously checking for any stray crumbs or wayward biscuit fragments. Other guests are already manoeuvring into position, forming a polite but determined queue for the host's attention. It's a delicate operation. You must wait your turn but not appear to be lurking. If you hover too close, you seem needy. Too far, and you might get mistaken for a servant or, even worse, someone attempting to sneak out unnoticed. The moment arrives. You approach the host with what you hope is a warm, genuine smile, not too wide, lest it reveal your true relief at impending freedom. Your thanks must be specific. What a delightful aspic. The conversation about hydrangeas was a revelation, but not overly effusive. If you gush, you'll seem insincere. If you're curt, you risk offence. Somewhere between gratitude and exhaustion lies the perfect farewell, delivered at a conversational volume that neither startles the host nor goes unheard, forcing a second round. With farewells exchanged, you make your way toward the door only to remember the final gauntlet: outerwear retrieval. Victorian cloaks, shawls, hats, and gloves require a small battalion of servants to locate and restore to their rightful owners. You wait awkwardly in the entry hall, praying your hat has not been crushed beneath a mountain of mufflers or accidentally swapped with Lady Plumworth's infamous feathered bonnet. There's an art to putting on one's coat without looking like you're wrestling a python. Gloves must be located and donned, preferably on the correct hands. If you drop a glove, the butler will retrieve it for you, but everyone will notice. The clatter of a misplaced cane or the tragic squelch of overshoes will echo in the marble foyer for years. Your last obstacle is the exit itself. A final nod to the assembled guests, a gentle smile for the remaining servants, and, if you're unlucky, a farewell handshake from the host dog. The door opens, the night air rushes in, and you step out, hoping your departure is remembered as elegant, not comic. Modern comparison. It's like leaving a holiday party at your boss's house, trying to say goodbye without drawing attention, only to discover your shoes are stuck together with spilled eggnog and someone else's coat is draped over your arm. As you descend the steps, the house glows behind you, filled with the soft hum of post-dinner gossip already forming. You pause at the garden gate to check for any leftover crumbs, straightening your posture as if the moon might be taking notes. If you've survived the evening without tripping, insulting the host, or wearing your cloak inside out, consider yourself a master of the long goodbye. Punchline. In Victorian society, the meal wasn't truly over until you'd exited the house with grace, and your reputation still intact. One misstep and you'd be consigned to the outer darkness of dinner party exile, left only with memories of aspic and the haunting echo of the butler's disapproving cough. Beneath the crystal chandeliers, an invisible army of servants glided, bent and tiptoed in perfect synchronization. One false move, a dropped dish, a cough during grace, and the whole operation risked collapse. As a guest, your challenge was to pretend you didn't notice Jenkins setting your pudding on fire, or the footman replacing your fork with something last used during the Crimean War. From the moment you entered the Victorian dining room, you became the audience for a silent performance, part ballet, part circus, all nerves. The household staff moved with a precision that would make a Swiss clock jealous. There was Jenkins, the senior footman, resplendent in livery, making a beeline for the table with a tureen of soup. Behind him trailed a squadron of under-footmen, each with a job so specific you could only guess at its purpose. Bread roll rotation, napkin folding triage, emergency candle maintenance. Every gesture was rehearsed. Platters arrived at the exact angle, never too close, lest you flinch, never too far, lest you reach. Water glasses filled to just the right level, never risking a flood or a drought. The servers never made eye contact, as if looking directly at the guests would break some ancient curse. Instead, they anticipated needs before they were spoken, refilling a glass or swapping a soiled fork in a maneuver so smooth it bordered on magical realism. But perfection teetered on a knife's edge. The silence was tense, broken only by the faint clink of silver, or occasionally the tragic thud of a dropped spoon. The staff operated on a code. Any mistake, however minor, must be erased instantly and never acknowledged by the guests. Your job was to stare straight ahead and pretend that pudding was always served with a side of spontaneous combustion. Sometimes catastrophe struck. A gravy boat toppled in a slow-motion arc, landing with a splash that threatened everyone's dignity and several petticoats. Jenkins would appear, cloth at the ready, and within seconds all evidence would vanish, except the slightly haunted look in his eyes. The room would collectively inhale, hold it, then resume conversation as if nothing had happened. Admitting you noticed the chaos was a greater breach than the chaos itself. As the meal wore on, you became aware of the subtle signals between staff. A cough in the corridor, a nod from the butler, a handkerchief dropped as a coded message. Servants darted in and out like shadows, swapping platters, smoothing linens, relighting candles extinguished by draughts, or by a particularly robust sneeze from Lady Morton. A plate arrived with the wrong sauce, swiftly swapped. Bread running low. Another basket appeared as if conjured by polite witchcraft. The real test was maintaining your own composure. No matter how dramatic the backstage disaster, be it a fainting undermaid or a flaming tart, you were to look on with the tranquil gaze of a marble statue. The only acceptable response was to praise the efficiency of the household, should anyone ask. Impressive staff, your lordship. Dinner positively glided by. Modern comparison. Imagine dining at a Michelin-starred restaurant where waiters appear to teleport, and your only job is to pretend you don't see the chef tackling a small fire in the open kitchen, or the host quietly herding a wayward chicken out the back door. When the final course was cleared and the staff withdrew, guests let out a silent sigh of relief. Another night, another impossible performance, perfectly executed by the invisible brigade. If you made it through without gasping, gawking, or openly applauding, you had played your part well. Punchline. In the Victorian household, the real stars were always in the wings, and if the servants made it look easy, that was only proof of their genius, and your good breeding, for never once acknowledging the chaos behind the calm. Victorian hosts adored their animals almost as much as their human guests, which meant you might find yourself dining opposite a pug in a velvet bow tie, or a cat with its own tiny chair. Heaven help you if you accidentally fed your pudding to Lord Cuthbert's spaniel, or failed to address Lady Beatrice's parrot with the proper honorific. From the moment you entered the grand dining room, you learned to expect the unexpected, and nothing was more unexpected, at least for the uninitiated, than the menagerie assembled around the table. Dogs, cats, parrots, and, in one memorable case, a pet hedgehog in a silk-lined basket, all granted the kind of respect that could only be bought with generations of inherited wealth and a very forgiving sense of hygiene. It started innocently enough. You pulled out your chair, only to discover it had already been claimed by Sir Reginald's bulldog, who regarded you with an expression equal parts suspicion and digestive distress. Politeness dictated you wait for a servant to gently relocate the beast, while the other guests pretended not to notice, or, worse, judged you for not greeting him first. He only responds to, "Your Grace," someone murmured. Dinner commenced with the animals taking their places. The pugs and poodles sat beneath the table, occasionally popping up like furry jack-in-the-boxes at the scent of roast beef. The more esteemed pets enjoyed miniature seats, embroidered, monogrammed, and certainly more comfortable than your own. Lady Beatrice's parrot, resplendent in a bejewelled collar, held court from his gilded perch, screeching the occasional bravo, or, more damningly, scandal at inopportune moments. Victorian etiquette extended to animals in ways both elaborate and mysterious. Bowls of filtered water and plates of delicately shredded meat appeared for the canine set. A cushion was fetched for the Siamese cat, who gazed upon the gathering with a mixture of contempt and boredom that would have shamed a dowager countess. If you dared drop a morsel to a four-legged diner, you had to be sure it was the right morsel for the right creature. Offering lamb to a terrier could prompt a mild gasp and a raised eyebrow from the host, as if you'd offered a bishop a glass of gin before noon. Even conversation was adapted to accommodate the animal's sensibilities. Guests complimented Lord Cuthbert's spaniel on his excellent posture, or Lady Beatrice's parrot on his exquisite mimicry. If a dog barked, the subject was swiftly changed to local game birds, just in case the hound took offence at mention of pheasant. Meanwhile, you lived in constant fear of treading on a tail, mistaking a furry foot for a dropped glove, or worse, having your pudding absconded with by an enterprising dachshund. Pet-related faux pas abounded. Guests were known to go pale upon realising they had forgotten to include the pets in their toasts. A cat ignored could mean chilli treatment at the next luncheon. A parrot slighted could doom you to a lifetime of unflattering impressions whenever you entered the room. The servants naturally were expected to anticipate every creature's needs, whisking away soiled dishes and distributing treats with the discretion of diplomats at a peace summit. Modern comparison. Imagine attending a formal dinner where half the guests are influencers' dogs, each with their own Instagram following, and the humans must compete for attention with a spaniel who once met the Queen. As the meal concluded, the animals were often the only ones truly satisfied. The pugs dozed, the cat licked her paws with self-satisfaction, and the parrot offered a final raucous cheerio as guests prepared to depart. Punchline. In the Victorian dining room, table manners weren't just for people, and if you ever find yourself seated beside a bulldog in a bow tie, just remember, address him as your grace, compliment his jowls, and whatever you do, keep your pudding close. Vegetarian, allergic to nuts, gluten intolerant. Good luck. Victorians viewed dietary restrictions as a suspicious new form of witchcraft. If you dared admit you didn't eat kidneys, the host would nod politely while mentally striking you off every future guest list and possibly alerting the local constable. As the first course arrives, jellied tongue with a mysterious garnish, you face a dilemma. Do you risk social exile by requesting something without organ meat, or simply smile bravely, move food around your plate, and hope no one notices you're conducting a one-person rescue mission for a solitary boiled potato? In Victorian England, food was a test of both fortitude and conformity. Culinary hesitation was suspicious. Culinary resistance was practically treason. To your hosts, dietary restrictions sounded like code for plotting sedition. Religious abstinence was just about tolerable, but anything else, vegetarianism, nut allergy, dislike of gooseberries, was met with incomprehension, scepticism, and occasionally a faint whiff of fear. "Why, my great-uncle ate nothing but kidneys, and he lived to 90, a guest would announce, as if this anecdote settled all debates forever. Vegetarians in particular were viewed with the alarm one might reserve for anarchists, or worse, someone from Paris. The mere mention of abstaining from meat prompted nervous glances and whispered speculation about spiritual maladies, or more damningly, radical political views. Meanwhile, the kitchen staff, confronted with a guest who couldn't tolerate oysters, celery, or the wrong kind of vinegar, descended into chaos, poring over Mrs. Beeton's cookbook as though it contained incantations for summoning emergency lamb. For the food allergic, dinner was an endurance trial. Peanuts weren't yet widely used, but tree nuts, milk, eggs, and suspicious essences lurked everywhere. The only strategy was constant vigilance and a talent for secret avoidance. If you dared inquire about ingredients, the cook would appear, tight-lipped, refusing to reveal any secrets, while the host looked on with a mixture of concern and mild horror. Even the act of declining a course was fraught with peril. To refuse aspic or pudding was to offend the kitchen, the host, and if the guest list included any clergy, possibly the Almighty. You might be met with a rictus grin and a barrage of, "But you must try the tripe, it's a family recipe." It didn't matter if the last family member who tried it was never seen again. Of course, the most intrepid guests developed tactics for survival, feigned toothaches, whispered excuses about doctor's orders, or the classic manoeuvre of rearranging food on the plate until it looked like you'd partaken. Sometimes you simply accepted the inevitable and quietly passed your portion to the family dog, earning a grateful glance from the pug in the velvet bow tie and a discreet nod from the butler. Hosts, for their part, tried to be gracious, but accommodating often meant simply removing the offending ingredient from your immediate plate and expecting you to manage the rest. True substitutions were rare and celebrated in hushed tones, as in, "Did you hear?" At Lady Fairfax's dinner they served lentils for Mr. Abbott. Lentils. The scandal. Modern comparison. Imagine attending a Super Bowl party where you sheepishly admit you're vegan, and everyone treats you like you've just confessed to tax evasion, offering a plate of unadorned lettuce and a look of grave sympathy. By the end of the meal you're exhausted, not just by hunger, but by the emotional acrobatics of appearing grateful for food you can't eat and tactfully avoiding questions about your unusual preferences. If you survive, you'll be remembered as that curious guest with the peculiar diet, a legend sure to persist at every dinner table for decades to come. Punchline. In Victorian dining, survival meant eating what you were given, or at least looking like you did. admitting dietary restrictions? Now that was truly hard to swallow. Children were often relegated to a separate, smaller table in a neighbouring room, ostensibly for their own good, but really so the adults could gossip in peace. If you were under 25, you might find yourself negotiating pea distribution with a 6-year-old and defending your dessert from a feral pack of cousins. The fabled child table was an institution as old as Victorian manners themselves. Disguised as a privilege, your own special table, my dears, it was in fact social Siberia. The adults, sighing in relief, shut the door behind you with the quiet satisfaction of people about to discuss family secrets and criticise Aunt Agatha's hat collection. You were left to make the best of your fate, elbow to elbow with siblings, cousins, and the occasional stray godchild who'd gotten lost on the way to adulthood. The table itself was an afterthought. Tucked into a chilly alcove, it wobbled on uneven legs and was always perilously close to the kitchen door or the piano, neither ever silent for long. The cutlery was mismatched, the napkins faded, and the plates invariably chipped, as if to remind you of your provisional status. There was never enough room for everyone's elbows, much less dignity. Here, the rules of etiquette were both stricter and more frequently broken. An older cousin, appointed table captain by virtue of being closest to legal majority, read out the list of forbidden acts. No loud talking, no using the butter knife as a catapult, no reenactments of the Crimean War with mashed potatoes. These rules were universally ignored within 5 minutes. The cuisine at the child table was a reflection of adult dining, filtered through a lens of benign neglect. You received smaller, colder portions of whatever was being served next door, with the sauces reduced to puddles and the jelly wobbling in a state of existential despair. The pudding was doled out with the accuracy of a mathematician, and woe betide the child who dared ask for seconds before the eldest declared the coast clear. Negotiating with your fellow exiles was a delicate art. Dessert was a precious commodity, and everyone eyed it like prospectors at a gold rush. The clever traded unwanted boiled cabbage for larger slices of cake, while the bold simply snatched what they wanted and blamed it on the baby. Every meal was an elaborate barter system conducted in whispers and coded glances, overseen by the eagle-eyed family nanny, who wielded a wooden spoon like a badge of office. All the while, sounds from the grown-up table drifted in. Laughter, clinking glasses, and tantalizing snatches of gossip about relatives you barely remembered. You would imagine the adults speaking in riddles, revealing the secrets of life over a never-ending flow of cheese and sherry, while you wrestled with peas and sibling rivalry. Escape attempts were common, but rarely successful. One enterprising cousin tried to sneak into the main dining room, only to be intercepted and marched back like a criminal mastermind. The humiliation lingered for years, retold every holiday as a cautionary tale. Remember when George tried to join the adults before his voice broke? Never again. Modern comparison. Imagine being sent to the kids' table at Thanksgiving as a college sophomore surrounded by toddlers, plastic cups, and the ever-present threat of someone starting a food fight with cranberry sauce. Still, the child table forged alliances and rivalries that would last a lifetime. Bonds were made over stolen sips of lemonade, victories celebrated with crumbs of shortbread, and lifelong feuds ignited over who got the last jelly tart. Punchline. In the end, the child table was less about manners and more about survival. If you escaped with your dessert, your pride, and your fingers unstuck from toffee, you were well on your way to conquering the adult table someday, where, rumour had it, the napkins matched and the pudding never ran out. After hours of pretending to savour aspic and smiling through digestive distress, some guests would sneak to the kitchen for a forbidden midnight snack. Here, in the sanctuary of the pantry, etiquette was finally abandoned. You could eat cold beef with your hands, gossip freely with the cook, and remember for a few blissful minutes what it was like to enjoy food without fear of social ruin. It was the worst-kept secret of any successful Victorian dinner party. The true feast happened not under the crystal chandelier, but under the watchful eyes of the kitchen cat and the sleepy scullery maid. When the clock struck an indecent hour and the house began to settle, a handful of guests, liberated from corsets, collars, and the ever-present gaze of Aunt Mildred, would make their way to the back stairs. There was no invitation, no need for polite conversation or coded eyebrow twitches. The pantry was a land without rules. Platters of cold roast and mysterious pies lined the sideboard, flanked by baskets of yesterday's bread and wedges of cheese that would never survive the morning. Gone were the endless ranks of cutlery. Now, fingers were the only utensils required, and napkins, if used at all, were more likely to mop up laughter than spills. The air was thick with forbidden pleasure, and the earthy aroma of real food still carrying the warmth of the oven. You could slouch against the counter, pick at leftover ham, or devour a hunk of fruitcake with the single-minded focus of someone who'd spent the evening negotiating truce between a tripe jelly and a block of Cheshire cheese. Every bite was a minor rebellion, a thumbed nose at every etiquette manual ever written. In these quiet, flower-dusted hours, gossip flowed more freely than wine at the main table. The cook, long-suffering and sharp-tongued, might share a spicy story about the master's bachelor days or the real reason the vicar wasn't invited to last year's picnic. Guests, relieved of their social armour, confessed to food aversions, secret crushes, or gasped childhood run-ins with the child table. Laughter, genuine and unchecked, filled the shadows. Here your status as lord, lady or eccentric cousin mattered little. If you could wield a carving knife or unearth the good pickles from the bottom shelf, you were in. In fact, the only sin was forgetting to offer a slice of sausage to the dog, who'd been waiting all evening for this very moment. As the candle burned low and plates emptied, a gentle camaraderie settled over the pantry. Someone might propose a toast with lukewarm lemonade, or dare another to finish the last slab of game pie. There were no wrong forks, no risk of butter-related scandal, no fear of the host's silent judgment. Only the warm, blurry happiness of shared rule-breaking and full bellies. Modern comparison, imagine the after party at a wedding, shoes off, ties around heads, everyone in the kitchen eating leftover cake straight from the tin, and finally, blessedly, being themselves. By the time you crept back to your room, shoes in hand and crumbs trailing behind, you felt lighter, not just in spirit, but in the quiet knowledge that for one night you'd tasted real freedom. Tomorrow you'd be back to folded napkins and polite small talk. But tonight, in the dim glow of the pantry lamp, you remembered how good food and company could be when etiquette was left at the kitchen door. Punchline. In the end, the midnight snack was the true soul of the Victorian dinner party, a brief escape, a shared secret, and proof that sometimes breaking the rules is the most civilized act of all. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, take a moment to be grateful that your dinner didn't require a 300-page manual, 3 costume changes, or the ability to decode complex eyebrow signals just to ask for more potatoes. Because surviving a Victorian dinner party wasn't just about having a strong stomach. It was about navigating a social obstacle course where every napkin fold was a potential scandal, every misplaced fork a tiny act of rebellion. You've made it through 9 courses, 16 glasses, and enough conversation about the weather to last a lifetime. You've outlasted the aspic, dodged the judgment of the butler, and lived to see the final cup of tea, all while keeping your dignity more or less intact. Let's give some credit to our Victorian friends. Their world was absurd, but they endured it with remarkable poise and the occasional sarcastic side-eye. They balanced a society obsessed with appearance, reputation, and endless rules. A society where spilling gravy on your gloves could haunt you for decades, and where surviving dessert was practically a competitive sport. As you tuck yourself into your blissfully soft, judgment-free bed tonight, no butler lurking, no fish fork required, maybe send a little sympathy to the guests who came before you. Those who braved the unyielding corsets, the unpronounceable menu items, and the terror of the cheese course, all for the sake of belonging, connection, and a story to tell later, preferably one with less gelatin. Because if history teaches us anything, it's that people are resilient, hopeful, and more than a little ridiculous. Even in a world built on etiquette so strict it bordered on comedy, people still found ways to laugh, to connect, and to sneak a midnight snack when nobody was looking. Sleep well, knowing your only dinner rule tonight is relax. You made it. And tomorrow you can eat with your hands, no monocle required. Good night.